Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. In this video, we're going to be talking about conditional statements. Sometimes in programming, we might want to check whether a certain condition is true or false, and then, perform some set of statements accordingly. So if, the weather is good, we want to wear shorts and a t-shirt. If the weather is cold, then we want to wear a jacket. And we want to be able to encode this sort of logic into our Python scripts. So that's exactly what conditional statements allow us to do. Now, up until this point, in Python, we have seen statements being executed such as A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals A plus B, and then, maybe we print out C. If I run this entire script, we're setting a bunch of variables and then we're printing out the answer, which is 3. Now, this follows a very linear and straightforward style. So I have some statement that gets executed. It goes on to the next statement, which gets executed, and then it keeps going until you reach the final statement and our code concludes execution. So in our specific example, our first statement would be A equals 1. And then after A equals 1, we set B equal to 2. Then we set C equal to A plus B. And then we go on to print C. So this is very straightforward because we just go like this. We might want to check whether a certain condition is true or false, and then perform some set of statements accordingly. So let's dive right in. The first type of conditional statement that you'll see is called an if statement. Emphasis on the if. And now an if statement looks something like this. So as a short example, let's code, something that'll take the absolute value of x. So let's set x equal to some number. Let's make it -5. Now, the absolute value of -5 is just 5. How do we code this in Python? Well, I can then use an if statement, which looks something like this. There's the keyword if. So you can see over here, Replit says this is the if statement. Also, by the way, I'm coding all of this in Replit, which you can find at replit.com, but if you have your own code editor of choice, go ahead and use that. So back to the if statement. Well, our if statement will start out with the keyword if. So if, and then what exactly is the logic of taking the absolute value? Well, if x were positive, we don't really have to do anything with x. If x is negative though, we want to essentially make it positive. So here, I'm going to say, well, if x is less than 0, that's when we actually want to do something. And we want to make x positive. And how do we do that? We simply negate it, because a double negative is a positive. And then at the very end, we can print x so that we print it out over here and we make sure that it's the correct absolute value. So if I run the script, I would expect 5, right? Because the absolute value of -5 is 5. So here we have 5. And if this is -10, we would expect -10. And if this were +10, well, the absolute value of a positive number should just be 10, which it is over here. So that is your if statement. If I were to go and draw out this conditional, it would look something like this. First, I have x equal to 10. And then after that, I'm going and I'm checking the condition. So here, our condition is x less than 0. So I'm evaluating this condition. And now if this evaluates out to true, then what we're actually going to do is x equal to -x, because that is what's underneath that if statement. And then, in the other case, it's false. So we actually don't go under this if statement, and then we just continue with the rest of the program, which in our case is print x. Now you might notice, okay, Well, our program doesn't end right here, right? Because even when we had negative numbers for our absolute value, we went and we printed x. So after you finish executing this if statement block, you actually continue with the rest of the program. So the way a conditional looks, the way an if statement looks is you have your if keyword, and then you have some condition. And then if that condition is true, then you have some statements under that condition that get executed, and then you have the rest of the program, right? And so if I colored this, so here, this is my condition. That corresponds to this box over here. So after we've fulfilled this condition, if we fulfill this condition, if this condition is true, then we go and we execute the statements in here. Now that statement, those statements can be more than one line. That corresponds to this box over here. And then the rest of the program is whatever follows this, and it's the rest of the program. So this is what an if statement would look like. If this condition is true, then we do something. Otherwise, we just continue. Okay, cool. And sometimes this statement can be more than one line. So here I can print, x is negative. And then I can negate x. And at the very end, I can say absolute value, and then also print x. So here you'll notice that I have two lines underneath this if statement, and we know that because they're indented. So indenting and spacing is really important in Python in these sorts of cases where you have this colon at the end of a statement. So if I print this, well, let's actually run this first when it's -10. So -10 is less than 0. We run, and we'll see that we actually run this statement, x is negative, because that gets printed out over here. We're negating x, and then we come to this part of our program saying the absolute value is 10. And if this were positive 10, you'll see that it skips this entire block right here. So if we run this, you'll see that this does not get printed out, and we don't negate the 10 either, and instead we just continue on the rest of the program, which prints out absolute value, and then whatever the value of x is, which is 10. So that brings me to today's sponsor, Skillshare. If the new year is the perfect time to reinvent your goals and yourself, then Skillshare might be a great fit for you. Skillshare is an online learning community where anyone can take a class, build projects, and even create their own class. Did you know that Skillshare actually has tons of career-focused courses, such as advanced Python programming and even interview preparation for software roles? One of my goals for this year is to grow my YouTube channel and give all of you guys some more content. Skillshare has classes that have helped me learn what it takes to break into this creative industry and to take classes to really find, more of my creative voice and style. And I'm really excited to share those ideas with you. And it's inspired me to create kind of a list of all of these ideas that I want to build and share. The first 1,000 people to use the link down below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Now, Kylie, what if we want to, do something else in the case where our condition is not true? How do we tackle that? So that is known as an if-else statement. So in an if-else statement, it looks something like this. If x divided by 2, well, the remainder of x divided by 2, if that is equal to 0, then we're simply going to print x is even. And otherwise, well, if x is not even, then it's what? It's odd. So here we can print x is odd. And now we also need to define an x. So x just is some number like that, right? And if I run this, then it will print x is even, just like we learned before, because our condition, this is an even number. I'll simplify this a little bit. X is an even number, so the remainder when we divide it by 2 is equal to 0. So in this case, x is even, and this gets printed, and then the rest of this just gets skipped. If I change this to 5, well, now this is not true. Previously, when we saw that this was false, we just skipped whatever was underneath that condition. But now, because we have this else statement, this is essentially saying, if this is not true, then we're going to do whatever is under the else statement. So this is a way of saying, okay, if this condition is not true, then we do all of this other stuff. And if I run this, you'll see that we actually skip this line because it's not true. And then we go over here. Okay? So how does that look like on the chart? Well, first we have x is equal to whatever number, right? 5, we can make that 8, we can make that 100, whatever. And then we have our condition, okay, x divided by 2, remainder, does that equal 0? So this is our condition. Made it green. So this is our condition, right? And if this condition is true, then we go to the branch that's underneath that condition. So that is this part. So whatever is here will be under that, where we print. I'm going to make this shorter and just say even. Okay? And now in the case where this is false, instead of going directly down like we previously did, this else statement is essentially saying, okay, we have this other part of the branch that we're trying to execute. And so over here, we're actually printing odd. Sorry, that got cut off a little bit. So that I will highlight in purple because it refers to this other branch. This is essentially saying, okay, if this condition is true, go and print x is even. If it's not true, then take the other path and print x is odd, right? And then at the very end, maybe we add like a print done or something. But whatever the rest of the program is, after these two are done executing, they both end up in the same place, which is the rest of the program. All right, so this if-else simply creates this branch over here. It creates this true into this set of code, and then this false into this other part of the code. And so that's what our if-else statement is for. It's so that we can check a condition and do all this, all these statements in case that condition is true, or we can go a different way and do everything if it's false. These are actually called branches because they are branches in the flow of execution, right? Because we're going one way or the other. Okay, but sometimes that's not even enough. We might want an alternative to, our first condition. So sometimes we want multiple branches. And in this case, we can use something called a chained conditional. So let's take a look at a chained conditional. Let's say we have two numbers, x and y. So maybe x equals 1 and y equals 5. Okay, and so if x is less than y, then we print x is less than y. Now, otherwise, we want to print x is greater than y. But wait, what if x and y are the same number? Then is x really greater than y? So that's where something called an elif statement comes in. So this essentially stands for else if. So this is saying otherwise, so if, it's not true that x is less than y, well, else if maybe x is greater than y, sorry, I can't type. In that case, then we're going to print, x is greater than y. And then otherwise, well, this means that they have to be equal to each other, right? X must equal y. we can print x is equal to y. So now we have 3 different branches in our conditional. So I'm going to run this. And right now x and y are equal. So x is equal to y. Okay, let's change x to 10. So now x is greater than y. And we print x is greater than y. But if we change y to 100, then now we get x is less than y. So in an if statement, these conditions that we have in here, they get checked in order. So this specific conditional, the flow of this looks something like this. Okay, so I'm going to put x equals 10, y equals 100 in the same box. So the first condition that we're checking is x less than y? Well, if it is, so let's say this is true, then we're simply going to print x less than y. And I'm doing this for space reasons. But if this is false, then I'm actually going to check, okay, well, is x in that case greater than y? And if x is greater than y, if this is true, then I'm going to print x greater than y. And then if that is in fact false, then at the very end, I'm going to print x equal to y. Okay, so what this is doing, this is essentially creating 3 different branches that we can take. So it's either this one, or this one, or this one, right? And in order to get to the 2 over here, the first statement has to be false. So right now, what we're doing in our conditional is we're first coming over to this box and we're saying, okay, is x less than y? Well, if it is, then we simply print x is less than y. If that's not true, then we go to our second condition because we have this elif statement. So else, if x is greater than y, then we print x greater than y. And now if all of those are not true, then at the very end, we follow this branch over here and we say, okay, well, the only thing left is that x is equal to y, and that's the statement that we execute. So that is our chained conditional. Now, actually, there's another way to write this specific code. So I could have also written it maybe like this. If x is equal to y, then we print x is equal to y. And else, okay, well, this is our if-else statement that we just saw, right? We can say print, x is not equal to y. But actually, underneath this branch, we're allowed to have any valid Python code, which means that we can actually have another if statement. So here I can also say if x is less than y, then we print x is less than y. And then, if that is false, well, okay, we know that they're not equal because we're in the opposite branch after that condition. So we know that they're not equal. We know that's not less than. So the only thing that can be left is greater than. So we can print x is greater than y. Okay, and to make this the exact same printout as what we just did down here, I'm going to remove this statement. Okay, so if we change this, to 1,100, you'll see that it prints out the correct thing where x is greater than y, and then if we make them the same, then x is equal to y. Okay, but when we compare these 2 statements, So let me zoom out a little bit so you can see both of these. So if I make this statement 1 and this here statement 2, well, which one is cleaner? Statement 2, right? Because statement 2, you just see the 3 different branches. You see the first condition, the second condition, and the third condition. In statement 1, you actually have to do some sort of tracing. You actually have to say, okay, well, if this is false, then we go through this other set of if statements, and then if that's true or false, then we have our 2 branches, which is not ideal. And so in coding, one good practice is that you want to make it as simple as possible. And in our specific example right here, statement 2 is a lot simpler than statement 1. So I can actually come over here and I'll draw out the diagram for statement 1 as well. So here, first we're checking, okay, do x and y equal each other? If not, then we are going to, or if this is true, then we print x equal to y. So this is if this is true, and if that's not true, then we go into another if statement. So I'm actually going to write that as this entire block down here. But essentially we go into another if statement where we're checking, okay, is x less than y? And if it is, then we print x less than y, and if not, then we print x greater than y. And actually, we could technically remove this whole entire thing. I just wanted to put that there to show you that this was all under one branch, this false branch, but we could, in fact, draw it something more like this. And let me put these into boxes. So you'll see that, you know, in theory, these two are very, very similar, statement 1 and statement 2. Actually, they're the exact same almost. But statement 2 is just a lot easier to read, especially if it's, you know, if you're reading somebody else's code. So you want to keep it simple and you want to keep it clean. Okay, so that is the lesson on conditionals. Today we learned about if statements and how we could use conditions in order to execute certain statements. And then we learned about if-else statements where we could execute one thing, but if that condition wasn't true, we could do some sort of alternative. And then we learned about how we can use else if, elif, in order to even create another branch. And so if you guys want some practice with that, there are some exercises linked down below. Join my Discord channel so that you can interact with other people also going through these courses, and you guys can all learn together. So good luck and stay tuned for the next lesson on loops. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss it.